The ship was falling apart around him. Ho gripped the controls with both hands as warning lights flashed red across every screen. Smoke filled the small cockpit, making his eyes water. The sound of metal tearing echoed through the cargo ship like a dying animal screaming its last breath. "Come on," he whispered through clenched teeth. "Just a little more." 3 pirate ships had come out of nowhere near the system. They had torn through his shields in seconds and ripped open the left engine before he could even send a distress signal. Now his ship, the old cargo hauler he had named Lucky Star, was anything but lucky. It was a burning coffin falling toward the jungle moon below. Ho was 32 years old. He had been flying cargo routes across the outer systems for 8 years. He had survived engine failures, customs officers, and 2 bar fights on Station Omega. But he had never been shot down by pirates before. The green and brown surface of rushed up toward him through the cracked viewport. The moon was covered in thick jungle, and somewhere down there was supposed to be a military base. They were one of the major powers in this sector of the galaxy. They looked almost human, except their skin had a slight blue tint and their eyes were larger, with colors that shifted like opals. Ho had never met in person. Humans were still new to the galactic stage. Most alien species saw them as a minor race, barely worth noticing. Humans had no great empire, no ancient history, and no impressive technology. They were just another species trying to survive among the stars. The ground was coming up fast now. Ho pulled back on the controls with all his strength, trying to level out the ship for a crash landing. Trees rushed past the viewport in a green blur. There was a terrible sound of branches breaking and metal scraping. Then everything went black. When Ho opened his eyes, he was hanging upside down in his pilot's seat. The safety straps were the only thing keeping him from falling to what was now the ceiling. The ship had flipped over during the crash. His head hurt. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, falling up toward the crumpled ceiling below him. Everything was quiet except for the soft hissing of broken pipes somewhere in the ship. "Okay," he said to himself. "Not dead, that's good." He reached up and unclipped the safety straps. He fell awkwardly, catching himself with his hands before his head hit the metal floor. Pain shot through his left wrist, but he could still move it, probably just bruised, not broken. Ho looked around the destroyed cockpit. Most of the screens were dark or shattered. The smell of burning wires filled the air. He needed to get out before something exploded. He crawled through the wreckage toward the emergency hatch. It took him several minutes to force it open. When he finally pushed through, he found himself in a jungle unlike anything he had ever seen. The trees were massive, reaching up hundreds of meters into the misty sky. Their bark was dark purple, and their leaves glowed with a soft blue light. Strange sounds echoed through the forest. Creatures called to each other in the distance, making noises that sounded like singing mixed with clicking. The air was thick and warm and wet. It smelled like flowers and rot at the same time. Ho took a deep breath and started coughing. The oxygen levels were fine for humans, but there were other things in the air that irritated his lungs. He went back into the ship and grabbed his emergency bag. Inside was a small medical kit, some food bars, a water filter, a flashlight, and an old pulse pistol that he hoped still worked. He strapped the bag to his back and the pistol to his belt. His communication equipment was destroyed. The distress beacon might still work, but he would need to find the beacon unit in the cargo hold and hope it was not too damaged. First, he needed to find shelter. Night was coming, and he did not want to be out in an alien jungle when darkness fell. Ho picked a direction and started walking. The jungle seemed to go on forever. Every direction looked the same. Purple trees, blue glowing leaves, strange plants that curled away from him when he got too close. Small creatures watched him from the branches above, their many eyes reflecting light like tiny mirrors. He walked for what felt like hours. His legs were tired. His wrists still hurt. The cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding, but it stung whenever sweat dripped into it. Just when he was about to stop and rest, he heard something that made him freeze. Voices, not animal sounds. Real voices speaking in a language he did not understand. Ho crouched down behind a large root that stuck out of the ground like a wall. He moved slowly and quietly, getting closer to the voices. Through the gaps in the vegetation, he could see a clearing ahead. There were several figures in the clearing. Most of them were large and rough-looking, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons. They looked like different alien species mixed together. Some had scales, some had fur, and some had skin in colors that Ho had never seen before. Slavers, he recognized the type. They operated in the lawless regions of space, capturing people and selling them to the highest bidder. They were the worst kind of criminals. But what caught Ho's attention was not the slavers, it was their prisoner. In the center of the clearing, tied to a metal post, was a young woman. Her skin was light blue, and her long hair was silver white. Her large eyes, even from this distance, seemed to shimmer with colors that changed as she moved. She wore torn clothing that had once been very fine, made of materials that seemed to flow like water. And not just any. The quality of her clothing, even in its ruined state, suggested someone important, very important. One of the slavers walked up to her and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. He was a big creature with gray skin and tusks growing from his lower jaw. He laughed and said something in that rough language. The other slavers laughed too. The woman did not cry. She did not beg. She just stared at her captor with cold hatred in her shifting eyes. Ho counted the slavers, 7 of them, all armed with better weapons than his old pulse pistol. He was injured, tired, and alone on an alien world he knew nothing about. The smart thing to do would be to walk away. Find his beacon, call for help, and let someone else deal with this. He was just a cargo pilot. This was not his problem. But Ho did not walk away. He thought about his mother back on Earth. She had always told him that the measure of a person was not what they did when people were watching. It was what they did when no one would ever know. No one would know if he walked away right now. No one would blame him. He would not even blame himself. But he would know. For the rest of his life, he would know that he left someone to suffer when he could have tried to help. Stupid, he whispered to himself. This is so stupid. He checked his pulse pistol. The charge was at 60%. That gave him maybe 20 shots if he was careful. 20 shots against 7 armed slavers. Ho studied the clearing, looking for any advantage. The slavers had set up a small camp with temporary shelters and storage containers. There were fuel canisters stacked near one of the shelters. If he could hit those, the explosion might take out some of the slavers and create confusion. He moved slowly around the edge of the clearing, staying hidden in the thick vegetation. The slavers were relaxed, not expecting any trouble. They passed around bottles of some kind of drink and talked loudly among themselves. Ho found a position where he had a clear shot at the fuel canisters. He raised his pistol, aimed carefully, and fired. The explosion was bigger than he expected. A ball of orange fire erupted from the canisters, throwing 2 of the slavers into the air. The others screamed in surprise and confusion, diving for cover. Ho was already moving. He ran into the clearing while the slavers were still disoriented, firing at any target he could see. One slaver went down with a shot to the chest. Another took a hit to the leg and fell screaming. The woman's eyes went wide when she saw him running toward her. He must have looked insane. A battered human with blood on his face, charging into a fight he could not possibly win. "Hold still," Ho said, even though he knew she probably did not understand him. He fired at the ropes binding her to the post. The energy blast burned through them and she fell forward. He caught her before she hit the ground. A shot flew past his head, so close he felt the heat on his ear. The surviving slavers had recovered from their surprise and were fighting back. Ho grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her toward the jungle. "Run," he shouted, "run." She seemed to understand that word, or maybe she just understood the situation. They ran together into the purple trees, shots flying after them and burning holes in the vegetation around them. Behind them, Ho could hear the slavers shouting. They were organizing a chase. Of course they were. Their prisoner was too valuable to just let go. The woman stumbled and Ho saw why. There was blood on her leg. She was injured, probably from before he had arrived. She was slowing down, her breath coming in gasps. "Come on," Ho said. He put her arm over his shoulder and supported her weight. "Keep moving. We have to keep moving." They pushed deeper into the jungle as the sounds of pursuit grew closer behind them. Ho did not know where he was going. He did not have a plan beyond getting away from the slavers. All he knew was that stopping meant death or worse for both of them. The woman looked at him with those strange, shifting eyes. She said something in her language. It sounded like a question. Ho did not understand the words, but he thought he understood what she was asking. Why? Why was this stranger risking his life for her? He did not have an answer that would make sense in any language. So he just kept running, carrying her through the alien jungle into the unknown darkness of the moon. Behind them, the slavers howled with anger and gave chase. And somewhere in the sky above, the wreckage of the lucky star sent up a thin column of smoke that rose toward the stars like a signal, like a prayer. Ho did not know it yet, but his life had just changed forever. The cargo pilot from Earth had just rescued Princess, youngest daughter of Queen, ruler of the Empire. And nothing would ever be the same again. The jungle was alive with danger. Ho moved through the thick vegetation as fast as he could while supporting the injured woman. Her blood was leaving a trail on the ground behind them. The slavers would follow that trail. He knew this, but there was nothing he could do about it except keep moving. The woman's breathing was getting worse. Her weight pressed against his shoulder and he could feel her trembling. She was trying to stay strong, but the wound on her leg was bad. She needed proper medical care, not a desperate run through an alien forest. "Just a little more," Ho said softly, even though she could not understand him. "Just hold on a little more." She looked at him and said something in her language. Her voice was weak but still held a tone of command. Even injured and being carried by a stranger, she held herself like royalty. Ho wondered who she really was. The clothes suggested someone important, but he had no idea how important. Behind them, the sounds of the slavers were getting closer. They were shouting to each other, coordinating their search. Ho could hear branches breaking and heavy footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. He needed to find somewhere to hide. Running was not working. She was too injured and he was too tired. They needed to disappear. Ahead, he spotted something through the trees. A rock formation rose from the jungle floor, covered in moss and vines. There were dark gaps in the rock that might be caves or crevices. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. "There," Ho said, pointing. "Can you make it?" The woman followed his gesture and nodded. She understood what he wanted even without understanding his words. They pushed forward, fighting through vegetation that seemed to grab at their clothes and skin. The rock formation was farther than it had looked. Every step felt like a mile. Ho's muscles burned with effort, and his lungs ached from breathing the thick jungle air. Finally, they reached the rocks. Ho found a gap between two large boulders, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. He pushed through first, pulling the woman after him. Inside was a small space, not quite a cave but more like a pocket in the stone. It was dark and cool and just big enough for both of them to fit. The vines covering the entrance made it almost invisible from outside. Ho lowered the woman to the ground as gently as he could. She winced in pain but did not cry out. He pulled the vines back into place to hide the entrance, then pressed himself against the stone wall, trying to slow his breathing. Outside, the sounds of the slavers grew louder. They were close now, very close. Ho put his hand over his pistol but did not draw it. If they were found, a fight would be hopeless. 4 slavers against 1 tired human with a half-empty weapon. His only chance was to stay hidden. Through the gaps in the vines, he could see shadows moving in the jungle. The slavers were searching systematically, checking every possible hiding spot. Their leader, the big one with the tusks, was shouting orders in that rough language. One of the slavers walked right past their hiding spot. He was so close that Ho could see the scars on his scaled face and the cruel curve of his weapon. The slaver looked around, sniffing the air like an animal hunting prey. Beside Ho, the woman held her breath. Her hand found his in the darkness and squeezed tight. Her fingers were cold and trembling. Long seconds passed. The slaver moved on, pushing deeper into the jungle. The sounds of the search gradually faded as the slavers spread out in the wrong direction. Ho waited until he could not hear them anymore. Then he waited longer. Only when complete silence had returned to the jungle did he finally let himself breathe normally. "I think they're gone," he whispered, "for now." The woman released his hand and leaned back against the stone. She looked exhausted. The blue of her skin had become pale, and her shifting eyes had dimmed to a dull gray. She was losing too much blood. Ho opened his emergency bag and pulled out the medical kit. It was basic, designed for minor injuries. A wound like hers needed surgery and proper medicine, but he had to try. He pointed at her leg and then at the medical kit. "I need to look at your wound. Is that okay?" She seemed to understand. She nodded and shifted her position to give him access to her injured leg. The wound was worse than he had feared. A deep cut ran across her thigh, probably from a blade. The slavers had not been gentle with their prisoner. The bleeding had slowed, but the wound needed to be cleaned and closed. Ho worked carefully. He used the antiseptic spray from the kit, and the woman hissed in pain as it touched her wound. He found wound closure strips and applied them as best he could, pulling the edges of the cut together. Then he wrapped the whole thing in a bandage. It was not good medical work. He was a pilot, not a doctor, but it was better than nothing. "There," he said when he finished, "that should hold for a while." The woman looked at the bandage, then looked at him. Her eyes had regained some of their color, shifting slowly between shades of purple and silver. She spoke a single word in her language, her voice soft and genuine. Ho did not know the word, but he recognized the tone. Gratitude. "You're welcome," he said. "Now we just need to figure out what to do next." He checked the contents of his bag. A few food bars, the water filter, the flashlight, and about 15 shots left in his pistol. Not much to survive on. His crashed ship was somewhere behind them, probably being searched by the remaining slavers by now. Going back was not an option. The woman watched him take inventory. She pointed at herself and spoke slowly. Ho repeated, "Is that your name?" She nodded and said the word again. Ho pointed at himself. "Ho, ho." "Ho," she repeated carefully, as if testing the sounds. Then she pointed at him and said something longer in her language, a question. He did not understand, but he could guess what she was asking. "What are you? Where did you come from?" "Human," he said, pointing at himself. "I'm human from Earth." "Man," said slowly, "Earth." She seemed confused by these words. Ho was not surprised. Humans were not well known in this part of the galaxy. The Empire was ancient and powerful, while humanity had only been traveling the stars for a few generations. To someone meeting a human was probably like meeting someone from a species she had only heard rumors about. Night was falling outside their hiding spot. The blue glow of the leaves had grown stronger as the natural light faded. Strange sounds filled the jungle as nocturnal creatures began to wake and move. Ho knew they could not stay here. The slavers would keep searching, and eventually they would come back this way, but could not walk far on her injured leg. He needed to come up with a plan. "My ship," he said, pointing in what he thought was the direction of the crash site. "Ship, There's a beacon, emergency signal, do you understand? Listened carefully, trying to follow his words and gestures. She spoke in her own language, and through tone and movement, Ho got the basic meaning. She was asking if help would come. Maybe, he said, if the beacon still works, if someone hears it. It was a long shot. The crash had been bad and the beacon might be destroyed. Even if it worked, help could take days to arrive. Days they might not have. Spoke again, more urgently this time. She pointed at herself and then made a sweeping gesture that seemed to indicate far away. She repeated a word several times with emphasis. Ho did not understand the word, but he understood the meaning. She was important. Powerful people would be looking for her. Your people, he asked, they'll come for you. She nodded, relief showing on her face. Yes, her people would come. She was certain of it. Then we need to survive until they do, Ho said. First priority is getting away from the slavers. Second is activating the beacon on my ship. Third is finding water and shelter. Can you walk? Tested her leg, putting weight on it carefully. She winced but nodded. The bandage was holding and the pain seemed manageable. They waited until full darkness before leaving their hiding spot. The jungle at night was a different world. The glowing leaves provided some light, but shadows moved everywhere. The sounds of predators hunting filled the air with threat. Ho led the way, moving slowly and carefully. Followed close behind, using him for support when the terrain became difficult. They avoided open areas and stuck to the deepest parts of the undergrowth. Hours passed in tense silence. Every sound made them freeze. Every shadow made them hold their breath. The jungle seemed endless, a maze of purple trees and strange plants that all looked the same. Near dawn, they found a stream. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth stones that glowed faintly in the remaining darkness. Ho used his filter to fill his canteen, then offered it too. She drank deeply, the water bringing color back to her pale blue skin. When she finished, she looked at Ho with those shifting eyes and spoke in her language. Her tone was wondering, almost confused. He thought he understood her confusion. Here was a human, a member of a species she knew nothing about, risking his life to help her. Carrying her through the jungle, treating her wound, sharing his water, and he had asked nothing in return. You're wondering why, Ho said softly, why I'm helping you. Tilted her head, not understanding his words but recognizing the reflective tone. Ho thought for a moment. How could he explain it? He was not a hero. He was just a cargo pilot who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the right place at the right time. Because you needed help, he finally said, and I could help, it's that simple. He knew she did not understand the words, but somehow, something seemed to pass between them. A recognition of something basic and universal that transcended language. Nodded slowly. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, a gesture that felt like both thanks and acknowledgement. Then she pointed upstream, toward where the first light of dawn was beginning to show through the trees. They needed to keep moving. The slavers would not give up, and rescue could still be days away. Ho helped to her feet, and together they continued their journey through the alien jungle. Behind them, the sun began to rise over the moon, painting the sky in colors that Ho had never seen before. Somewhere out there, a kingdom was searching for its lost princess, and somewhere in the jungle, slavers were hunting for their escaped prisoner. But in that moment, all that mattered was the next step, and the next, and the one after that. Survival was not about grand plans or heroic courage. It was about small choices, made one at a time in the face of impossible odds. Ho had made his choice back in that clearing. Now he just had to live with it. And hopefully live through it. 3 days had passed since the crash. Ho sat against a fallen tree, watching sleep. Her leg was healing slowly, thanks to the daily bandage changes and whatever natural healing abilities her species possessed. She could walk now without too much pain, though long distances still tired her quickly. They had found his crashed ship on the second day. The Lucky Star was a twisted wreck, half buried in the jungle floor where it had carved a long trench during the crash landing. But the emergency beacon was intact. Ho had activated it, and now it was sending a distress signal out into space, calling for anyone who might hear. The slavers were still out there. They had seen signs of the search several times, burned vegetation where search beams had swept, footprints in the soft ground. Once, they had hidden for hours while a slaver patrol passed within meters of their position. But somehow, against all odds, they were still free, still alive. Stirred in her sleep, making a soft sound. Ho had learned a lot about her over the past 3 days, not from conversation, since they still could not understand each other's words, but from observation, from small moments, from the way she carried herself. She was strong, not just physically but in spirit. The wound on her leg would have left most people crying in pain, but she walked on it without complaint. The fear of being recaptured would have broken many people, but she faced each day with calm determination. And she was kind. She shared the food bars equally, even though Ho tried to give her more. She took turns keeping watch at night, even though he insisted she needed rest. She had even tried to help when he was struggling to activate the beacon, her delicate fingers working alongside his rough ones. Whatever her position was in society, she had not learned to be helpless. She had learned to survive. Ho looked up at the sky through a gap in the jungle canopy. The moon had 2 suns, and right now both were visible, one red and one orange, casting strange double shadows through the trees. Somewhere up there, ships were traveling between worlds. Somewhere up there, help might be coming. Or might not be. The beacon's range was limited, and this was a remote part of the system. It could take weeks for a rescue ship to arrive, if one came at all. He tried not to think about that. Opened her eyes and sat up slowly. Her shifting eyes found him immediately, and she smiled. It was a small smile, tired and worried, but genuine. Over the past 3 days, they had developed their own simple language of gestures and expressions. That smile meant good morning, and I am glad you are still here at the same time. Morning, Ho said, returning the smile. How's the leg? She touched her bandaged thigh and nodded. Better. He handed her the canteen, and she drank while he checked their supplies. 2 food bars left. Water was not a problem thanks to the stream nearby, but food was running out. He would need to find something to eat soon. Finished drinking and looked at him with a questioning expression. She pointed at the sky and then at her ear, listening for the rescue signal. No ships yet, Ho said, shaking his head. But the beacon is working. Someone will hear it eventually. She seemed to accept this with the same calm acceptance she showed toward everything. If she was worried about her fate, she did not show it. They spent the morning doing the small tasks that had become routine, checking the area around the camp for signs of slavers, refilling the water canteen, changing the bandage on his leg. The wound was closing well, clean and pink, showing no signs of infection. In the afternoon, started asking questions. She pointed at things and spoke words in her language, waiting for Ho to respond with the human words: tree, rock, water, sky, sun. Ho answered each question, and slowly they began to build a shared vocabulary. It was nothing complex, just basic nouns and simple verbs, but it was communication, connection. Earth, Ho said, pointing at himself. I come from Earth. It's a small planet far away from here, blue and green with 1 sun and 1 moon. Listened carefully, trying to understand. She pointed at herself. Home. Ho repeated. I've heard of it. They say it's beautiful, floating cities and crystal oceans. She smiled at his tone, even though she did not understand all the words. She pointed at him again and spoke slowly. Man, Earth, why, here? It was the most complex sentence she had attempted in his language. Ho was impressed by how quickly she was learning. Cargo pilot, he said, mimicking the action of flying with his hands. I carry things from one place to another. I was on a delivery run when the pirates attacked. They shot down my ship and I crashed here." Nodded slowly, putting together the meaning from his words and gestures. Then she pointed at herself and spoke in her own language, using gestures to fill in the gaps. From what he could understand, she had been traveling with a diplomatic group when their ship was attacked. The slavers had killed most of the guards and taken the survivors prisoner. She had been separated from the others and kept alone, perhaps because of her value, perhaps for other reasons that she did not want to explain. "I'm sorry," Ho said softly. "That must have been terrible." She looked at him with those shifting eyes, and for a moment he saw the pain she had been hiding, the fear, the grief. She had lost people she cared about. She had been imprisoned by monsters who saw her only as merchandise to be sold. But she did not cry. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders, pushing the pain back down where it would not interfere with survival. Ho understood that reaction. Sometimes you had to put the feelings away until later, until you were safe, until you could afford to fall apart. That evening, as the two suns set and the jungle began to glow with its own internal light, asked another question. She pointed at Ho, then made a gesture that seemed to mean fighting. Then she pointed at herself and raised her eyebrows. "Why did you save me?" It was the same question she had been asking since the beginning in different ways. Ho had avoided answering it directly, mostly because he did not have a good answer. But tonight, watching the alien colors play across her face, he felt like he should try. "Humans are strange," he said slowly, choosing simple words she might understand. "We're not strong like some species. We're not fast. We don't have claws or natural weapons. In the galaxy, we're nobody, a small species from a small planet." Listen, her head tilted slightly to show attention. "But we have one thing," Ho continued. "We care. We see someone hurting and we want to help. We see something wrong and we want to fix it. It doesn't matter if it's dangerous. It doesn't matter if it's not our problem. Something inside us just refuses to look away." He paused, searching for the right words. "I saw you in that clearing, tied up, surrounded by enemies, and I thought about what would happen if I walked away. I thought about what kind of person I would be if I left you there." His eyes were fixed on him, their colors shifting faster now, as if responding to his words emotionally. "I couldn't do it," Ho said simply. "I couldn't be that person, so I did something stupid and reckless, and here we are." There was silence for a long moment. Then spoke, her voice soft and thoughtful. She used a mix of her words and the human words she had learned. "Humans," she said, "small, new to stars, but strong here." She touched her chest over her heart. Ho smiled. "Maybe, or maybe just stupid." "Not stupid," shook her head firmly. "Brave, good." She moved closer to him and took his hand, holding it between both of hers. Her skin was cool and smooth, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "My people," she said slowly, working through the unfamiliar words. "No humans, say weak, say primitive, say not important." Ho nodded. He had heard such things before. It was how most of the galaxy viewed humanity. "My people wrong," continued. "Very wrong, you show me truth. Humans not weak. Humans strong in different way, important way." She squeezed his hand and looked directly into his eyes. In that moment, despite the differences in their species, despite the barrier of language, Ho felt a connection that went beyond words. "When my people come," said, "they will know, I will tell them, what humans are, what you did. The galaxy will know truth about humans." Ho felt embarrassed by such grand words. "I'm just one person. I don't represent all of humanity." Smiled, "One person enough. One person can change everything." That night they sat together watching the unfamiliar stars through the jungle canopy, pointed out constellations from her culture, shapes in the sky that her people had named thousands of years ago. Ho could not see the shapes she described, but he listened to the sound of her voice and felt something he had not felt in a long time. "Hope," Somewhere out there, the beacon was sending its signal. Somewhere out there, rescue was coming. He believed that now. And somewhere out there, a queen was searching desperately for her youngest daughter, the daughter who had been lost, the daughter who had been found by the strangest savior imaginable. A human, a simple cargo pilot from a small planet called Earth. The two suns rose the next morning, painting the sky in colors of fire, and with them came a sound that made both Ho and freeze where they stood. The roar of ship engines, many ships coming closer. Looked up at the sky, and for the first time Ho saw tears in her eyes, not tears of fear, tears of relief. "My people," she whispered, "my people come." The rescue had arrived. The sky was full of ships. Ho had never seen anything like it. Dozens of vessels broke through the clouds above the jungle, their silver hulls catching the light of the twin suns. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, massive warships that made his crashed cargo hauler look like a child's toy. The royal fleet had arrived. Was standing beside him, her face lifted toward the sky. Tears were flowing freely down her blue cheeks now, and she was speaking rapidly in her own language. Prayers, perhaps, or words of thanks, or simply the release of fear that she had been holding inside for days. One ship descended lower than the others, a magnificent vessel with golden markings on its hull. It was larger than the rest, more elegant in its design. The royal flagship, Ho guessed, coming to collect the lost princess. He felt a strange mix of emotions as he watched the ship approach, relief that would be safe, pride that he had helped her survive, and something else, something he did not want to examine too closely. Sadness, perhaps. Their journey together was ending. "You should go," he said, though he knew she might not understand all the words. "Your people are here, you're safe now." Turned to him with an expression he could not read. She shook her head firmly and grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the clearing where the flagship was landing. "No," she said in careful human words, "together you come." "I don't think that's a good idea," Ho started to say, but she was not listening. She pulled him along with surprising strength for someone who had been injured just days ago. The flagship touched down in a clearing not far from the crashed Lucky Star. Its engines powered down and a ramp extended from its belly. Soldiers poured out first, heavily armed warriors in gleaming silver armor. They fanned out in formation, weapons raised, searching for threats. Ho felt his heart pound as dozens of alien soldiers turned their weapons toward him. He raised his hand slowly, showing he was not a threat. Next to him, shouted something in her language, her voice carrying the authority of command. The soldiers froze, their weapons lowered slightly, but their eyes stayed locked on Ho with suspicion and hostility. To them, he was an unknown, a stranger holding the hand of their princess. More figures emerged from the ship. Officials in fine robes, advisors with worried faces, guards with ceremonial weapons. They clustered at the bottom of the ramp, staring at with relief and disbelief. Then the crowd parted, and a woman stepped forward. Ho knew immediately who she was. She did not need a crown or a throne to announce her status. Power radiated from her like heat from a sun. She was tall, taller than, with skin of deep blue that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her hair was white like her daughter's, but streaked with silver that spoke of age and wisdom. Her eyes shifted through colors so quickly they seemed to contain entire galaxies. Queen, ruler of the empire. She walked toward them with measured steps, her gaze fixed on her daughter. Behind her, the entire crowd seemed to hold its breath. Even the jungle had gone silent, as if the planet itself recognized royalty. Released Ho's hand and ran to her mother. Queen caught her daughter in her arms, embracing her tightly. For a moment, the powerful queen was just a mother, holding her child who had been lost and was now found. They spoke rapidly their voices mixing together in a rush of emotion. Ho caught some words he recognized: slavers, ship, attack, crash, human. Queen's eyes found Ho over her daughter's shoulder. Her gaze was intense, measuring, evaluating. He felt as if she was looking directly into his soul, seeing everything he was and everything he had ever been. He tried to stand straight despite his exhaustion. He was covered in dirt and dried blood. His clothes were torn and stained. He looked like a beggar standing before an empress. But he did not look away. Whatever she thought of him, he had nothing to be ashamed of. He had done the right thing. Turned and gestured for Ho to come closer. She spoke to her mother, pointing at him, her voice passionate and insistent. Ho walked forward on shaking legs, stopping at what he hoped was an appropriate distance. Queen released her daughter and stepped toward him. She was even more imposing up close. Her presence filled the clearing like a physical force. She spoke in, her voice deep and resonant. An aide rushed forward and murmured something to her. The queen nodded and spoke again, this time in heavily accented but clear human words. "You are the human," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, your majesty," Ho replied, hopping that was the right title. "Ho, cargo pilot." "My daughter tells me you rescued her from the slavers." The queen's eyes never left his face. "She tells me you carried her through the jungle when she could not walk, that you treated her wounds, shared your food, protected her from danger." "I did what anyone would do, your majesty." "No," the queen's voice was sharp. "That is not true. Many would have walked away. Many would have left her to her fate. You chose differently." She circled around him slowly, examining him from every angle. The soldiers watched in tense silence. The advisors whispered among themselves. Ho stood perfectly still, feeling like a specimen under study. "Humans," the queen said thoughtfully, "your species is young, weak by galactic standards. Your technology is primitive. Your empire is small." She stopped in front of him again. "And yet here you stand, having done what trained warriors could not, having saved the life of a princess when all seemed lost." Ho did not know how to respond to that, so he said nothing. Queen turned to her daughter and asked something responded at length, her voice growing more emotional as she spoke. She described their journey through the jungle. Ho realized. The hiding, the running, the nights spent watching for danger. She described his care for her wounds and his refusal to abandon her even when escape would have been easier alone. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes again. Several of the advisors and soldiers looked at Ho with new expressions. Not quite respect, but something approaching it. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke again, this time to her attendants. Her words carried the weight of royal decree. Whatever she was saying, it was important. An aide approached Ho with a translation device. "Her Majesty wishes you to understand her words directly," the aide said, placing the small device near Ho's ear. Queen's next words came through in perfect human speech, the translator working seamlessly. "You have done a great service to the Empire," she said. "You have saved the life of my daughter, whom I love more than any treasure in the galaxy. Such an action cannot go unrewarded." She gestured, and servants came forward carrying a chest made of some gleaming metal. They opened it to reveal crystals of various colors, jewelry that sparkled with alien light, data chips that probably contained access to wealth beyond imagining. "These are gifts from the throne," Queen continued. "Enough to buy a fleet of ships, enough to live in luxury for the rest of your human years." Ho looked at the treasure, then back at the Queen. He thought about his cramped apartment on Earth, his old cargo ship that was now a wreck, his bank account that was always nearly empty. Then he shook his head. "I'm honored, Your Majesty," he said carefully, "but I didn't help for a reward. I helped her because it was the right thing to do." Silence fell over the clearing. Even the translation device seemed to pause, as if uncertain it had heard correctly. Queen's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes, a new layer of evaluation. "You refuse the reward?" she asked. "I refuse to take payment for basic decency," Ho replied. "Needed help. I was there to give it, that's all that happened." Spoke rapidly to her mother, and though Ho could not understand the words, he caught the tone. She was defending him, explaining something about human nature that she had learned during their time together. Queen raised a hand, silencing her daughter. She studied Ho for a long moment, and this time her gaze felt different, not evaluating, considering. In my experience, she said slowly, beings act out of self-interest. They may pretend otherwise, but at the root of every action is personal gain, power, wealth, status. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the shifting patterns in her opal eyes. You have shown me something different, she continued. Something I had not believed possible, pure action, pure kindness, no expectation of return. She turned to face her gathered subjects, her voice rising to carry across the clearing. This human refused a reward, she announced. He did not save my daughter for gold or power. He saved her because his heart demanded it. The crowd stirred, murmuring among themselves. Ho saw expressions of confusion, surprise, and something that might have been wonder. Queen turned back to him, and now there was warmth in her ancient eyes. I have ruled for many centuries, she said, her voice softer now, meant for him alone. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have known warriors and kings, scholars and saints, but I have never seen anything quite like you, Ho of Earth. She reached out and touched his face gently, a gesture that made every soldier in the clearing tense with surprise. Tonight there will be a celebration, she said, a feast to honor my daughter's return. You will attend as guest of honor. Your Majesty, I really should. That was not a request, Queen said, but her tone was kind. You will come, you will eat, and you will tell me more about these strange beings called humans. She turned and began walking back toward the flagship, pausing once to look back over her shoulder. I have the feeling, human, that the galaxy is about to change, and you are at the center of it. With that, she disappeared into the ship, leaving Ho standing in the clearing, surrounded by alien soldiers and advisors who looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Appeared at his side, smiling. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. Come, she said in her careful human words. Mother likes you. This is rare thing, very rare. Ho let himself be led toward the flagship, still not quite believing what was happening. He had started this journey as a simple cargo pilot. Now he was the guest of honor at a royal feast. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of humor. And somewhere in Queen's ancient eyes, a plan was already forming. A plan that would bind this remarkable human to the throne in ways that neither he nor the watching galaxy could possibly imagine. The celebration was only the beginning. The great hall of the flagship was filled with light and music. Ho had never seen anything so beautiful. Crystal chandeliers floated in the air, casting rainbow patterns across walls that seemed to be made of liquid silver. Musicians played instruments he could not name, creating melodies that stirred emotions he did not know he had. Hundreds of nobles filled the space, dressed in flowing garments that shimmered with every color of the spectrum. And at the center of it all, looking completely out of place, was a human cargo pilot in borrowed clothes. They had given him something to wear for the occasion. A simple outfit by standards, probably meant for servants, but still the finest thing he had ever put on his body. The fabric was soft and light, colored a deep blue that reminded him of Earth's oceans. Stayed close to him throughout the evening, introducing him to nobles and officials who looked at him with curiosity and barely hidden disdain. He was a novelty to them, a strange creature from a primitive world who had somehow stumbled into their glittering society. But some looked at him differently, those who had heard the full story of the rescue, those who knew what he had done for their princess. In their eyes he saw something that surprised him: respect. The feast itself was overwhelming. Dishes he could not identify, flavors he had never experienced, drinks that made his head swim after just a few sips. Ho ate carefully, aware that every eye in the room turned to watch him at various moments. He felt like an animal in a zoo. Halfway through the evening, the music stopped. The conversations died away. Everyone turned toward the raised platform at the end of the hall where Queen sat upon a throne that seemed carved from a single massive gemstone. She rose, and the silence became absolute. "My subjects," her voice carried through the hall without effort, "we are gathered tonight to celebrate the return of my daughter, Princess, from the darkness that had claimed her." Applause filled the hall. Nobles stamped their feet in a gesture that Ho assumed was the equivalent of cheering. Queen raised a hand, and silence returned. "My daughter was taken by slavers. She was injured alone, lost on a hostile world. By all rights she should be dead or worse." The Queen paused, letting her words sink in. "But she was saved, not by our mighty fleet, not by our trained warriors. She was saved by a single being who asked nothing in return." Every eye in the hall turned to Ho. He felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "The human, Ho," Queen continued, "showed courage that would shame our greatest soldiers. He showed compassion that would humble our priests. He showed strength of spirit that our philosophers speak of only in ancient texts." She descended from her throne, walking slowly across the hall toward where Ho stood. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. "And when I offered him wealth beyond measure," she said, stopping in front of him, "he refused. He said he had only done what was right, that no reward was needed or wanted." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Refusing royal gifts was unheard of in society. Queen turned to address the assembly once more. "Our laws speak of such beings, beings who perform acts of pure virtue, beings whose hearts are uncorrupted by greed or ambition. Our ancestors called them spirit-touched." She turned back to Ho, and her eyes were shining with something ancient and powerful. "But our laws also state that such beings cannot simply walk away. Their virtue creates a bond, a debt that cannot be measured in gold or land." Ho's heart began to race. Something was happening, something he did not understand. "I invoke the right of claiming," Queen said, her voice ringing through the hall like a bell. "I, of the House of Stars, ruler of the Empire, do hereby claim this human as our own." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the hall. Nobles looked at each other in shock, even seemed surprised, her hand tightening on Ho's arm. "What does that mean?" Ho asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It was an advisor who answered, leaning close to translate. "The right of claiming is an ancient law. It binds the claim to the royal house, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as family, as blood, as eternal protector of the throne." Ho's mind reeled. Family, blood, eternal protector. Queen continued, her voice filling the hall. "From this day forward, Ho of Earth shall bear the title of Shield of the Realm. He shall be granted all rights and privileges of nobility. His voice shall carry the weight of the crown. His word shall be as law in matters of protection." She reached into her robes and a small object, a medallion of silver and gold, shaped like a star with a sword through its center. "This is the symbol of the shield," she said, holding it up for all to see. "There has not been a shield for 3,000 years. The last was a hero whose name is still spoken with reverence. Today, I give this honor to a human." She stepped forward and placed the medallion around Ho's neck. It was surprisingly warm against his skin, almost like it was alive. "Do you accept this honor, Ho?" Queen asked, looking directly into his eyes. "Do you accept the burden of protecting this house, this kingdom, this people?" Ho looked around the hall, at the nobles who watched with expressions ranging from awe to jealousy to pure confusion, at whose eyes were shining with joy and pride, at Queen, whose ancient gaze held a wisdom he could not begin to understand. He thought about his life before, the lonely runs between stations, the empty apartment waiting for him on Earth, the feeling that he was just passing through the universe without ever really mattering. And he thought about the past few days, the fear and the danger, but also the purpose, the connection, the sense that what he did actually meant something. "I accept," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. Queen smiled, and it transformed her face. For a moment, she did not look like a queen. She looked like a mother who had found something precious. She turned to the assembly and raised her voice once more. "Let the galaxy know. Let every empire and every kingdom hear. The throne has claimed the human Ho. He is one of us now until the stars grow cold and dark." The hall erupted, not with the polite applause from before, but with genuine cheering. Whatever doubts the nobles might have had, they knew the significance of what they had just witnessed. An ancient law unused for had been invoked. A new shield had been named. And that shield was a human. Threw her arms around Ho, laughing and crying at the same time. "Now you stay," she said in her careful human words. "Now you are family, my family." "I don't know what just happened," Ho admitted, still dazed. "Good things," assured him, "very good things." As the celebration continued around them, Queen approached once more. She placed a hand on his shoulder and spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "You wonder why I did this," she said. "It was not a question. The thought had crossed my mind, Your Majesty. My daughter sees something in you, something rare. I have lived long enough to trust her judgment." The Queen's eyes seemed to look through him, into some distant future he could not imagine. "The galaxy is changing, Ho. Old powers are fading. New ones are rising. And I believe your species is going to be at the heart of that change." "Humans, we're nobody in the galaxy." "You were nobody," Queen corrected. "Today, you became the shield of the most powerful empire in the known systems. Today, humanity became someone." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I am not a fool, human. I know the value of what I have just done. By binding you to our house, I have bound your species to our interests. When humans rise, and they will rise, they will remember that was the first to recognize their worth." Ho understood then. This was politics as much as honor. The Queen was making an investment in the future, but somehow that did not make it feel less genuine. "I am still going to protect your daughter," he said. "Not because of laws or titles, because it's right." Queen smiled, that warm, genuine smile again. "I know. That is exactly why I chose you." The celebration continued deep into the night. Ho danced with, stumbling over the unfamiliar steps while she laughed with pure joy. He drank with nobles who had once looked down on him but now treated him as an equal. He listened to stories of ancient heroes and realized that, somehow, he had become part of that tradition. And when the suns finally rose again over the moon, Ho stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching the jungle where he had nearly died. Found him there, standing quietly at his side. "Strange few days," he said. "Strange and wonderful," she agreed. "Yesterday I was a cargo pilot. Today I'm the shield of an empire." "You were always more than cargo pilot," said softly. "You just did not know." Ho looked at the medallion hanging around his neck. The weight of it reminded him of the weight of responsibility he now carried, not just to and her mother, to his entire species. Humans had been nobodies in the galaxy, ignored, dismissed, forgotten. But not anymore. Word would spread. Stories would be told. The tale of the human who saved a princess, refused a fortune, and was claimed by a queen would travel to every corner of known space. And everywhere that story reached, beings would look at humans differently. They would wonder what other surprises these strange creatures from Earth might hold. It was, as Queen had said, just the beginning. Ho smiled and put his arm around shoulders. She leaned into him, comfortable and trusting like family. "So," he said, "what exactly does a shield of the realm do anyway?" Laughed, the sound bright and full of promise. "Everything," she said, "you do everything." And somewhere in the vastness of space, on a million worlds and a billion screens, the announcement was spreading. The Empire had claimed a human, the first human ever to be bound to alien royalty. The galaxy had just gotten a lot more interesting. And Ho, once a nobody from nowhere, was right at the center of it all. This was his story now, his destiny. And it was only just beginning.